now. Why is his face pixelated now? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome to this marine safari. My name is Pierre de Villiers. I'm a senior manager for Marine Coast Operations in Cape Nature. The webinar is hosted in celebration of Marine Month. National Marine Month is celebrated every year in October, and the purpose of this celebration is to create awareness of marine and coastal ecosystems, promotion of sustainable use, conservation of resources. The aim is to benefit all forever. The overarching theme for Cape Nature for this webinar is marine protected areas. And just a note, which I find quite exciting, is that Cape Nature has an active has an active role of young women or women in general. They play a critical role in marine protected area management and ecosystem conservation. Cape Nature manages 6 marine protected areas, and what I'd like to do now is introduce you to some of the staff that work at these marine protected areas. Firstly, we'll start up on the west coast with Bird Island near Lambert's Bay. Yves Chilesler. And then we'll... everybody. Thank you, Yves. Then we'll introduce Lauren Matthews from Roshapan Marine Protected Area and Berg Estuary.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We'll then go to Edward Richards around the Point, Betty's Bay Marine Protected Area.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And lastly, we'll get to Wayne Mayer at Khokama Marine Protected Area towards Plettenberg Bay.
Hi there, afternoon.
Okay, so we're going to be doing this in a structured manner, and please, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we'll try and answer them at the end of each presentation. If we don't get to them, it doesn't mean we won't answer you, but please email them to learning@capenature.co.za. We will get to all your questions, I promise you. Okay, to start with, today we're going to Yves on the west coast. Yves will be presenting on Bird Island, and please can you tell us what is so special about that island? Yves?
Oh, sorry. Yes, hi. Bird Island is about 100 meters offshore of Lambert's Bay on the west coast. It's a very important breeding site for cormorants and gannets. We also have a strong presence of seals in the area, and it can be a tricky site to manage, especially in terms of predation.
Yves, tell us, there's really an interesting relationship between seals and marine birds on the island. Can you explain more?
Yes, when an island ecosystem is occupied by seabirds and seals, especially on a small island, and competition for space is an issue, seals will always have to be managed. It is very common for seal population to take up the lion's share of such an island, leaving very little space for seabirds. This has happened in several South African islands like Fondland Island, also on the west coast, which went from 0 seals in the 80s to 50,000 today. North Island in Namibia went from 0 to 5,000 seals in a decade. And the same is happening at Robberg Nature Reserve. The colony is growing continuously. Yeah, the seal colony at Bird Island started in the 70s, making it a relatively young colony. The colony grew slowly but steadily, and in the process posed a threat to the existing gannet colony. Seals consume large number of birds, particularly penguins, gannets, and cormorants, and these are predated mostly at sea around the islands. In December 2005, things changed for the worse, and on-land predation began, making the gannet population the main target for the invading seals.
Oh, that's interesting, Yves. What is the impact of seals on breeding colonies, bird breeding colonies?
Okay, in the photo that is illustrated, a bull charging down on the gannets is an epitome of poor management, as it should never have reached this stage. This was taken in 2005 when it was peak breeding time for the gannets. Gannets are highly specialized birds and breed in dense colonies. When a bull comes charging into a colony, the densely packed birds can't take off. See the photo. And the seals will grab any birds it can get hold of. Sometimes this is unsuccessful and leaves the birds injured. Seals take their prey then to the water and consume it there, and it will repeat this hunting pattern until it is full. This behavior carried on for approximately 2 weeks. The entire colony was affected, and the disturbance led to the abandoning of the island, which adversely affected the gannet's breeding. The island was hence deserted for 6 months.
Okay, I mean, that seems quite unacceptable as far as bird management goes. What are are there management actions that can take place to address this challenge?
Yeah, firstly, we restricted the seals to a designated area, which we manage on a daily basis. That was the first thing. Then we positioned gannet decoys in the colony area to give the passing gannets overhead a measure of security, as they were very reluctant to land. Further on, seals and seabirds are protected by the Seals and Seabird Protection Act. However, we were able to get a permit, and those seals that were implicated in this kind of behavior were shot and taken out of the system. Okay, our interventions ensured that they settled over time and managed to breed. However, it took them 3 years to fully recover. The lesson that was learned was that seals should not be allowed on any islands without proper management in place, as they have an adverse impact on breeding seabird colonies.
Okay, thanks, Yves. We've got a very interesting clip that we'll share, and if you can talk us through it, please.
Well, they're just following their instinct, and they have to jump into the sea. Once they realize how good it is for them, after that first wash, they realize, well, this is what my wings are for, and in the next 10 minutes they can be flying if they don't get caught. Aye. Okay, he's looking again. Okay, you spotted him, here he comes. Got him. Out of that little group that left, 6 went, there's 3 left. 1 big seal operating. He's eating more than 15 today. It's not stopping because he's still hungry. Yeah, frustration is just not the word.
Thanks, Steve. What I'm going to do now is just check for any questions in the chat box. If there aren't any, then we'll move on to the next presenter. It seems all quiet down there, Eves. I think you're lucky. Okay, there is a question. Sorry, I missed that.
Are there any issues with land-based predators at Bird Island?
So, Eves, are there any issues with land-based predation at Bird Island? From land predators, land-based predators?
Yeah, we have had water mongoose in the past, and we had to sort that one out as well. But we haven't had on-land predation by seals for 15 years. We really have been on it in keeping the seals away from the gannets and preventing them from even habituating the area around the gannet colony.
Okay, thanks, Eve. I think we'd like to move on now, if there are no more questions, to our next presenter, Lauren Matthews. Lauren's going to present on estuaries and the Berg estuary specifically. Lauren, can you tell us and the viewers what an estuary is and a little bit about the Berg estuary, what the Berg estuary is? Thank you.
Okay. So an estuary is a place where rivers enter the sea. The estuarine areas are dynamic and resilient as life is adapted to sudden changes in salinity, water temperature, and sediment loads. Although estuaries make up a very tiny portion of our marine area, they are high-powered ecosystems that deliver multiple services. They are also nursery areas for young fish, and because of their high productivity, they are economically and ecologically valuable. Estuarine habitats such as salt marshes play a key role in carbon storage and climate regulation, and estuaries provide food, materials for construction, and safe areas during extreme weather events, so they can assist in the control of floods as well.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thanks, Lauren. So they're really special, but what kind of pressures exist on them?
Okay, so some pressures on the estuaries include freshwater flow reduction as a result from freshwater abstraction in the catchment area. There's also fishing, coastal development, and wastewater discharge. Estuaries are vulnerable ecosystems, but they can recover if the flow requirements are met, water quality development and fishing are managed, and invasive species are avoided. Gill netting in estuaries particularly compromises the nursery function of these valuable ecosystems.
Okay, so now that's a broader picture on estuaries. What about, you work at the Berg estuary yourself. Can you tell us something about the Berg estuary specifically, please?
Okay, so the Berg estuary is situated about 140 kilometers north of Cape Town in a small town named Veldrif. It is one of 5 estuaries on the west coast, permanently open, and is one of the largest in the country with a total of 61 kilometers squared. The Berg estuary is one of the most valuable in terms of conservation. It has been identified as an important bird area and is also currently in the process of becoming a Ramsar site. For those who do not know, a Ramsar site is one that is recognized internationally as a conservation area of value, and therefore a framework will be provided for national and international cooperation for the conservation and wise use of the wetland and its resources. There are many species, including economically important fish species, dependent on the estuaries to complete their life cycles and to provide a shelter and nursery area, as I said. When they grow up, they go out to sea and are caught by the local commercial fishermen in the area, who use this as a source of income. The Berg River estuary in particularly contributes about 60% of the estuarine habitat on the west coast and is important to protect and conserve for the future, considering that commercial fishing in the area is one of the main incomes to the small town. The estimated value of the nursery fish in the area is about 9 million rand per year.
Wow, thank you. So ecosystems and fisheries, really important. Can you give us a couple of other examples of why estuaries are important?
Okay, another important value of the estuary is also tourism, both nationally and internationally. The Berg River estuary is a popular site for recreational fishing, as well as water sports such as water skiing, kayaking and canoeing, and general boat use. The estimated recreational value of the estuary is about 10 to 20 million rand per year. One can only imagine the loss that will be faced if the quality of the estuary declines to a point where such activities can no longer take place. It is important to note the functioning and quality of the Berg estuary is highly influenced by impacts and return flows from the upper, middle, and lower parts of the Berg River and catchment area. The Berg River is a main source of domestic water supply and is also essential for agricultural, industrial, and environmental purposes. However, pollution in the Berg River catchment is a great concern to community members, farmers, and the industry in the various municipalities of the West Coast and Cape Winelands region. The Berg River catchment is also home to cultivated agricultural land. So the land use in the catchment is mainly agricultural crop production, with about 600 farm units providing employment. And it is therefore of great importance to address the issue of pollution, as it will significantly impact the economic value of the area.
Well, this is quite a complex management field. And I understand now you need to look at the catchment for some of your problems. Could you identify some of these sources of pollution in the Berg River?
Okay, so some of the sources, starting with wastewater treatment works. There are about 35 wastewater treatment works, which either impact directly or indirectly to the water quality of the river and contributes high levels of microbiological loads. Then there's also informal settlements. There are about 35 informal settlements that have an impact as well. They each consist of about 7,500 structures and 35,000 people living in the settlements. And because they don't have proper sewage place, their microbiological impacts also on the area. And then there's also other sources such as agricultural runoff with the chemicals in pesticides and herbicides, and also the abstraction, like I said earlier. And then there are also natural impacts such as the decrease or the increase in the rainfall.
Okay, so we know bad water quality is bad for the ecosystem, but what is the impact of bad water on people, water quality?
Okay, so the first impact is on the agricultural export. So it is important to note that the deciduous fruit industry in the Berg River catchment is estimated to have a value of about 1 billion rand, with approximately 75% of the fruits exported to the European Union and United Kingdom. In 2004 and 2005, the markets actually dropped or were at risk of being cancelled due to pollution from the informal settlements. The water pollution in the Berg River catchment will therefore impact on unemployment and social services. And then there's also the possibility of diseases. Because of the pollution in the river, it may lead to waterborne and endemic diseases such as cholera and diarrhea. And then there's loss of revenue in municipalities that trade water also from the Berg River. So both the West Coast District Municipality and the Berg River Local Municipality generates a revenue from trading the water sourced from the Berg River. Deterioration of the quality of water due to pollution is projected to reduce the revenue generated at both municipalities.
Okay. Okay, it's important work, hard work. What is currently being done to ensure freshwater flows and reduce pollution?
Okay, so next slide, please. The first thing that is currently happening is the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning have come up with a Berg River Improvement Project. So this consists of upgrading wastewater treatment works. It also includes upgrading the informal settlements along the Berg River. And then they also do water quality monitoring every month to make sure that the levels of pollution doesn't reach a stage where it will become harmful to humans. And then there's also various legislation applicable to the protection and sustainable use of the Berg River. So there's the Integrated Coastal Management Act, the Water Act, Marine Living Resources, and also municipal bylaws. Okay.
Thanks very much, Lauren. That was a really interesting presentation. I mean, what you're saying is we manage literally from catchment to coast. I'm just going to check now in the chat.
Any cases of bird estuary?
Have there been cases of bird flu at the estuary this year? I'm sure you can answer that.
Yes, there have been cases at the moment, unfortunately, but we do patrol every day, and we are removing all the carcasses and the sick birds as well from the area.
Okay, if there's no more questions, thanks very much, Lauren. I think we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Edward Richards from Betty's Bay Marine Protected Area. Edward, welcome. And where would we find the Betty's Bay Marine Protected Area?
Well, the Betty's Bay Marine Protected Area is directly adjacent to the little town of Betty's Bay, which is approximately 27 kilometers southeast of Gordons Bay and approximately 37 kilometers northwest from Hermanus on the R44. Beautiful little town, come and visit.
Some good marketing there by Edward. Edward, what are the management objectives for this marine protected area?
Well, Pierre, basically there is three types of goals. That's the biophysical goals, the socio-economic goals, and then the governance goals. Now, the biophysical goals is basically to protect the marine and ecoregion systems, the ecosystems, and the biodiversity and ecological functioning thereof. And then we move over to protect the depleted and endangered and endemic species, and populations, and to protect habitats, which are important for the survival and revival thereof. And we would really like to contribute towards the long-term viability of marine fisheries as overspill from the MPA.
Okay, so thank you for that. What are the risks posed to the Betty's Bay Marine Protected Area?
We must still go to the socio-economic goals as well.
Yeah, we skipped that. The socio-economic goals is to promote non-consumptive ecosystem opportunities. We would like to provide opportunities for marine ecological research and monitoring of the environmental effects of human activities on marine ecosystems, and currently there are also programs in place that really nicely incorporate the local community and fishers into this program, and then facilitate the interpretation of marine ecosystems for the promotion of conservation among scholars and tourists, which I think is quite important. And if we can move over to the governance goals, which is probably 90% of what is happening in our MPA at the moment, and that's to reduce the conflicts between competing users in the marine protected area, as well as the surrounding buffer areas, which basically is all the way from Royals to Kleinmond. And we would like to ensure that appropriate and effective legal structures are developed for protecting the biodiversity of the MPA and the activities that surrounds it and benefit from it. So yeah, we also need to fulfill South Africa's international commitment to marine protection in terms of international protocols and conventions. A very active little MPA, small but dynamic.
Yeah, so, thanks very much. Yeah. It's quite an integrated system of different goals and objectives. If you're working through all those, what are your priorities and what is your high risk area?
So Betty's Bay is very well known for high quality of abalone and West Coast rock lobster. So poaching of abalone and secondly the poaching of West Coast rock lobster in and around the MPA is very high risk and threat for the marine resources. And coupled with that, it also endangers the local communities who wish to protect these resources, because we obviously are working with organized groups and organized crime, which also involve gangsterism. So the intensive, just one back please. The intensive and blatant poaching of abalone, just one up. The intensive and blatant poaching of abalone has taken place throughout many years, probably last 18, 20 years in the MPA, and it really represents the criminal activity as the intensive exploitation of organisms at one level of the food chain is ecological, very disruptive. And the thinning out of the abalone stocks cannot be led to impairment of the reproductive potential, and hence all their exploitation potential in surrounding areas.
Okay, so I mean, you talked about organized crime, you're talking about syndicates. There must be some structured strategy from a Cape Nature perspective on how to deal with all this. Could you share some of that?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Pierre. So Cape Nature integrates with, for example, PAKISA, which incorporates under one umbrella the police, ourselves, other conservation bodies, the Overberg law enforcement task teams and law enforcement, as well as Department of Forestry and Fisheries Environment. So under one umbrella, we structure our weekly, daily and monthly operations under a 5-pillar approach, which is quite interesting. The 5-pillar approach encompasses the gathering of intelligence, proactive enforcement, reactive enforcement, investigations, and media awareness, which I will elaborate a bit on the next slide. Just to explain what is meant by these 5 different pillars we are actively involved in. So to start off with intelligence, we basically gather information and analyze it towards a coordinated approach between the respective enforcement agencies, which is basically the building block for all the other enforcement actions that happens from there and ultimately lead to prosecution. If you can go over to the proactive enforcement. Proactive enforcement, we focus to prevent poaching in the area through visible policing, set up roadblocks with other agencies, and basically prevent poachers to harvest marine resources illegally. Looking at the numbers, it's quite a substantial task, but without that, we really need to keep the resource in the ocean, and I think it's a very important part of the approach we manage. Going over to the reactive enforcement. We structure towards combating of poaching and focus tactical interventions where the poaching syndicates are arrested and their assets seized due to the criminal activity they engage in. So, you know, when all the intelligence is gathered and analyzed, we more or less get a good idea of what the modus operandi are, and we can structure like a reactive operation to catch them in the act if they busy with the whole circle of organized crime or part of a circle of organized crime, and then we can take them to court. And after that, if we go over to investigations, So the investigation is a very important part to pull all the strings together. We focus on the detection of illegal activities, the investigation thereof, and then obviously collecting all sorts of evidence, and then compiling a docket for the prosecution of the suspects in court. And that is ultimately where we want to get with these guys. And lately, if you look at the news, there was quite good prosecutions and arrests made over the past year or so. And then the last pillar is media and awareness, which is probably the most important, is to communicate to the public, all the interested parties, on what is happening on the ground. And therefore, articles are written with, which are published in the media. Honestly, and that's my personal experience, this also helps to get public involved in providing information on illegal activities for further investigation. And we, through that, build rapport with the public, which also want to be part of the successes that we get to. Yeah, and that is the 5-pillar approach. So looking at the legislation we use in and around the marine protected area, it starts with the Constitution of South Africa, which provides us the mandate and to look after the environment. Then the National Environmental Management Act of 1998, the National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act of 2004, the National Environmental Management Protected Areas Act, specifically in the Marine Protected Area, and then also the Marine Living Resources Act. The one I haven't got in here, and that is also where we move towards, is through gathering all the information when it goes over to higher organized crime. We also use the Prevention of Organized Crime Act to get better prosecutions.
Thanks, Edward. This is critical work you're doing, you and your teams. The success of it will result in a functional ecosystem as well as stocks that can be sustainably used going forward. So thank you for your efforts. One of the questions in the chat box is, would drones assist you in gathering evidence for prosecutions?
Most definitely. We've had intelligence that when drones are used, the poachers, when they see it, they call it a schoenlapper. They see the schoenlapper is in the air again, which is quite funny. But most definitely, drones is a very useful tool in the apprehension and getting evidence for further prosecution.
Another question, has lockdown in the past year or so impacted on less or more on poaching and maybe success rate of your anti-poaching operations?
Most definitely. We saw when on the highest level of the lockdown, the activities almost came to an end because they were very vulnerable. There were very few people on the road, so it was actually easy to police. But as it escalated back to normality, where we aren't yet, it really assisted. And then also it helps in the time frames with the curfews. So after hours activities can easily be detected. So yeah, the lockdown has definitely assisted in this.
Thank you, Edward. Yes, the poachers will keep coming, like crime will carry on in all countries. But I think from this presentation, you can see Cape Nature and enforcement partners are doing it in a structured manner, and we will get on top of this. So thanks, Edward.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so then I think time to move on to the presentation by Wayne Meyer, the Khokama Marine Protected Area. Over to you, Wayne.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I apologize, I've got a bit of a camera malfunction, so I'll just be going ahead without the camera. Okay, if we can just go to the top of the presentation there. Okay, so Khokama Marine Protected Area, we've got 3 key projects for monitoring the fish populations. As you can see, Khokama is in the Knysna area between Buffalo Bay and Sagefield. Next slide. The MPA was proclaimed in 1990. It's got a 16.5 kilometer coastline. It extends for 1 nautical mile out to sea. It's closed to all marine harvesting except shore-based angling. And currently there's a proposal to rezone sections of the marine protected area, which would encompass more reef into the sea section, the deeper reef section. We're also in a very lucky position to have a paper published by Kerworth et al. In 2013, which has shown a benefit to the local fisheries by increased catches in Roman on the borders of the marine protected area. Next slide. So currently, as you can see, the darker patches are the reef, and the other is the sand. And you can see that most of the reef that we're trying to protect is outside of the MPA. Next slide. So if we get to realign the southern boundary of the MPA, we will encompass a lot more of that reef. And then we will also include sections of the estuary and close a bit of the shoreline to shore-based angling also. Next slide. So we have 3 key programs. The first is the National Marine Lionfish System. Second is the Tag and Release CPUE program. And the third one is the baited remote underwater videos. Next slide. National Marine Lionfish System is one of the biggest and oldest lionfish catch and effort databases in the world. How these surveys are undertaken is that on normal patrols, each angler is inspected and their catch is inspected and measured as well. And all of that is recorded. And then you get catch per unit effort data, which is basically how many hours it takes to catch one fish of each species. And that is sort of an international standard for measuring fish stocks. Next slide. And this is typically one of our big busts that we also record the data. All of these fish caught will be measured and so on, and it all goes into the database. Next slide. The next project is the Tag and Release program. And here we basically also monitor catch per unit effort. And we are comparing areas inside the marine protected area to outside to see if there is management success, if we're managing to protect the stocks inside the MPA. We also contribute to the national tagging program at ORI. And we also compare various population dynamics like sizes and movements of the fish species and so on. And yeah, if we are able to get rezonation from all of these programs, we're going to have very good data of what it was like in the current zonation of the MPA. And then if we change the borders, then how might some stocks recover and how might some get worse? Next slide. So we have a control area here outside the MPA. And then we have another 2 kilometer section inside the MPA that we compare. Next slide. For those that are new to tagging, this is how it works basically. The fish is caught. Best handling practices are used to get the fish in and out of the water as quickly as possible without any injuries. Next slide. And then the spaghetti tag, it's called, is inserted between 2 of the spines into the back of the fish. Next slide. And each spaghetti tag has a unique ID number, which is basically like a South African person's ID number. There's only one out there. And there's also a number on the tag where people can phone and report it. So they'll report where it was caught, the date, and the length. So we can check how much it moved, how much it grew, and other data like that. Next slide. This is done on 8 weekends a year. We make use of volunteer anglers from the local community, 8 anglers per weekend. And to limit bias, we have standardized hooks and bait and tackle. Next slide. There's another happy angler with a kabeljau. Next slide. And safely released back into the sea. Next slide. Results since 2013 when we started, we've had mainly galjoen, blacktail and lesser sand shark making up 70% of the catch. We've made use of 134 anglers, which has had amazing outreach to the local community and education and awareness as well. We've caught 2,700 fish, of which 873 were tagged. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick look at the different species that were caught. 14 shark species, 6 ray, and 21 bony fish, and 9 sparridae. Next slide. And there's some of the data. You'll see the galjoen and the blacktail and the lesser guitarfish, that's the sand shark, are very much dominant. And next slide, please. When you remove those, then you'll see the other species a bit more clearly. You can also see here which ones were caught in chonas. Chonas is outside the MPA, and oyster beds is inside the MPA. Next slide. Some of the interesting data, for example, galjoen. We've tagged 213 of them, and you'll see most of them that we've caught are at the minimum size length. And then some very interesting data. Some of them have moved 944 kilometers in a total of 1,400 days. Next slide. So yeah, we do have low catch rates because of the fishing pressure, because shore-based angling is allowed in the marine protected area. There's little variation between inside and outside the MPA. But would be fantastic data again going forward. Next slide. There's somebody, Enrico, who's hooked onto a big one. Next slide. The third program we're looking at today is baited remote underwater videos, also initiated in 2013. With this, we monitor the offshore reef fish species, which is largely a different set from the inshore reef fish species. These species are receiving protection in the MPA because no boat-based angling or spearfishing is allowed in the MPA. Next slide. That's basically one Bruvs rig. It has a small GoPro camera on the one side, and then on the other side is a canister of sardines, and it's dropped in for an hour at a time. We have 4 of them rotating, and then you film the fish for an hour, and then at a later date you can watch the videos and gather the data. Next slide. All 3 of these projects are long-term data sets. Yeah, we also, with the Bruvs, are able to check if we're having management success by comparing inside and outside. And we also have very good environmental education comes out of this, because we get some good movies, and then we also get a species list. Next slide. We have 4 different zones. We have inside the MPA, outside the MPA, and then outside becoming inside and inside becoming outside, those if the rezonation goes through. Next slide. The cameras are soaked for 1 hour. As I say, we have 4 on rotation. Next slide. We also had a master's come out of this program so far at UCT from Jackson Dando. He analyzed 8 seasons, which was 480 hours of footage. So he must have had square eyes of note, because that's more than 1,002 hours of analysis, because you've got to watch each hour for 2 to 3 hours to gather all the data. This data was also then compared to Betty's Bay, Stilbaai, and De Hoop, and some interesting comparisons and results came out of it. Next slide, please. That's just a very brief look at the fish species that were caught. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, there's the rest of the species. You can go to the next one, please. Okay, the data of this program, just go one back there for me, please. One slide back. There we go. Data shows a marked difference. Just one slide forward again there. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, that's the one I want. Data shows a marked difference between inside and outside fish stocks, showing definite MPA protection success, albeit in a small area, referring to the amount of reef that we have inside. And there's also a very good presence of sharks and rays, which is good news because they're sort of an indicator species of a healthy ecosystem. Great opportunity when rezonation happens. And one thing that's lacking in this study, in this program, is that you aren't able to measure lengths with one GoPro camera. But there's new technology called stereo bruvs, where you'll have 2 cameras on a system. Next slide. And that's the stereo bruvs rig, where you have 2 cameras calibrated and you're able to measure the lengths of the fish as well. So the idea would be to do the GoPro bruvs once a year and then the stereo bruvs every 5 years, because the reef fish do grow quite slowly. Next slide, please. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Really interesting presentation. I mean, what effectively you're saying is the monitoring is critical, because what you don't know, you can't manage.
That's right.
We're going to show a clip of what is seen underwater with the bruvs, just to give everyone some perspective of what we're talking about. Wayne, maybe talk through some of the species.
Yeah, that's the red one there. The red and white is the Roman. And then the ones with the big eyes that come every now and then is the France Madame. That shark is a pajama shark. And there's a couple of other species here like blue Hottentot and Streepie as well. This is sort of a classic type of conglomeration of species on the reef.
Yeah, and these cameras stay down a lot longer than a diver can stay down.
Yeah, and they're less intrusive as well, because fish tend to swim away from divers, but the cameras generally get the most species of all the methodologies. So it's very good data.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go to some of the questions now. What happens if a tagged fish is poached, or I'm assuming caught, and it's not by one of your team?
Well, each tag has the phone number of Oceanographic Research Unit on it, so people can report the tags themselves through WhatsApp, phone call, or email, or online. So we're pretty sure that a lot of people don't do it, especially when they've got illegal undersized fish. But there is a lot of recaptures reported, so it is good to see.
Okay, and then just that answers one of the other questions. They have an ID number and everything, but do they provide live location data?
No, it's not sort of that sort of tag, the satellite tag that gives live data. So you'll basically just get the person who tags it initially will give coordinates of where he tagged it, and then the person who catches it will do the same. So it could have swam a lot more in either direction, but at least it's a catch and release data.
Okay, and then will Grenicke's Point be included in the rezonation? Because it's felt that it's quite an economically significant spot for tourism. So I'm assuming the question means, will it be closed or not?
Gericke's Point hasn't been included. It's a bit far away from where we are as Gokama. So basically the proposal is to extend the seaward boundary further south and include different zones in the estuary, and to close a section of the Gokama boundary to marine shore-based angling. So no, Gericke's isn't included.
Thanks, Wayne. And one of the questions, you don't have to answer this, but are these slides available? I think that should be addressed via email to that email address, learning@capenature.co.za. Is there more time for some questions? Okay, so I'm just going to go up. Some of these were linked to Betty's Bays. The best authority to report poaching, I think the guest's name is Lindsay. Lindsay, I would request you to send an email as well. I wouldn't like to deal with that kind of thing on a broad group like this, to that learning@Cape Nature, and I will provide you with the contact details. It obviously depends on where you are and where you want to report. And then Ms. Riedlinghuis, you wanted to know if there was vacation work. We don't offer that at the moment. What we do offer is well-integrated learning internships and informal internships from varsities, and students work through our partners to do research on our marine protected areas. I think we've pretty much covered all the questions there. If I've missed any, then please follow up with emails. And even if you haven't asked questions now and you want to ask a question, please follow up with the email. I think we can move on now to the lucky draw. It's a solar rucksack. It's quite an interesting concept. I haven't seen it, so I'm really interested to see a picture of this. It sounds like it's quite big, but I'm sure it's not. It's a very comfortable piece of equipment. Okay, everyone, we're waiting for the lucky draw. You'll just have to look at my face for a while the technical team is working through the process to identify who the lucky person is. You write it down?
Yes.
I'm getting it written down. Some compliments, very interesting, excellent presentations. Thank you very much to the presenters. Amazing session, thank you for that as well. Fran Kloss van Skalkwyk. Francis. Francois van Skalkwyk. Sorry, I think the writing's poor. I think a doctor just gave me that name. So Francois van Skalkwyk is the lucky winner, and we'll make contact, and Francois will get a solar rucksack. Sorry? Please send an email to the email address that you were provided, learning@capenature.co.za. Then without further ado, I'd like to call an end to this wonderful trip. Thank you all the participants, the Cape Nature technical team. They've really made it smooth for us. And special thanks to all the viewers. It's been a special moment for all of us. Thank you and farewell.